Okay, good evening, everyone. What we're going to do now is one of the first of the question and answer sessions. And I'm going to try and answer as many of the questions as I possibly can from what you've put into the community section. Thank you, some of you, for your questions. What I have definitely noticed is that not many people like putting commas in things. So to try and work out what on earth's going on here, I have added a few commas in, and I'll ask the questions before I answer them so that everyone knows what I'm answering. I'm also here. I'm not on Alan. I considered doing this whole thing sat on Alan or in Alan, and I thought it makes a lot more sense to be here. So I'm here. So you'll be listening to me yabber on for a while about all sorts of things Alan and sort of partly Alan related. Anyhow, let's get on with them. The first one is, how much longer until you think Alan will be done? Or will Alan truly never be done and you'll keep improving him for the rest of eternity for more expeditions? Well, I like your long-term thinking, amateur, with a 4 in the middle of the word. I do love usernames. There's the old thing that, a boat is never finished. People draw analogies with the Severn Bridge. The second it's finished being painted at one end, it's time to start painting it at the other. And of course, boats do always need an awful lot of work. But although Alan was bought originally with the intention of having one big journey put through him, I think now I want to put multiple journeys in his way. And for that reason, I think every time there's a new challenge, there's a new expedition, there's a new journey, I'll probably want to make modifications to Alan. If more budget appears, I can make Alan better, a sort of enhanced Alan. So we'll see. And certainly last year, when I was getting him ready for the expedition, which I should be on now, but was cancelled due to COVID, it was very much is this going to achieve what I want it to achieve? It doesn't need to look pretty, it just needs to work. And at the moment, a lot of the work I'm doing is actually modifying and improving things that were already perfectly functional last year. The next question is, do you have any worries that the hull might become encapsulated in ice if there's a period where the hull is stationary for a period of time? That's the first part of the question. I'm not particularly worried because the hull I particularly chose for that reason. If you look back in history, there are a whole load of different ship hulls that have been designed for use within ice, and it means that as ice comes in from either side to potentially crush a hull, like you got with, for instance, the Endurance down in the Antarctic, where the whole thing was simply crushed to pieces and sank. Instead, you have designs where there's a rounded bottom with a shallow keel, and hopefully, in the right conditions, it means that the boat lifts up and pops out of the top of the ice pack and isn't crushed. Now, of course, lifeboats are not designed to be ice rated or to be locked into sea ice, but you can buy one with the correct hull shape that gives you the best possible chance, maybe with a bit of help with winches and so on, of not being crushed by ice. And Alan is very much one of those. I've seen some other lifeboat designs where they are quite sharp with either very vertical sides and then a flat bottom, or double deep keels. There's all sorts of types of lifeboat you can get out there, but these totally enclosed ones do tend to be quite good in terms of having a nice rounded hull with a shallow keel, and that does give Alan the best possible chance of not being crushed. Now, the original plan of the expedition I should be on now, I keep on referring to that expedition, I know, he was supposed to be locked into ice. That was actually the plan. And so we had taken into account that there might be some teething issues getting him safely either onto the ice or amongst the ice. And so there was going to be a large winch we were going to have either to roll him or to actually drag him on his hull and then support with bags full of snow, or even with larger supports at either side to keep Alan stable. So not worried at all, but just taking precautions because he will come across a lot of pack ice in the future. The next bit of that question was, do you think the structure will hold? I don't think it needs to hold because I don't want to get into a position where he is being actually compressed either side by ice. If that's happened, then we've made a big mistake. And do you think he'll be easily to escape from being stuck in ice? No. Once Alan is stuck in ice, he is stuck in ice until the ice breaks up. He's not an ice break. He's a lifeboat with a 48 horsepower engine. 48 horsepower when the engine was built, probably not anymore. So, no. Alan, if he's stuck in sea ice, will then be able to escape when the sea ice lets him. The next question is, what is the temperature range Alan is designed for? Curious, as designing mechanical and electrical equipment for anything less than 20 degrees Celsius has a host of challenges to deal with. Cheers. That's a nice sign off. Yeah, so Alan is a fully rated SOLAS lifeboat, but not a polar or an ice rated one. It's mostly insulated from factory build, and so most of the insulation work you saw me do in episode, I think it was episode 4, that was to increase the amount of insulation in towards the stern of the boat. But other than that, it's the standard SOLAS certified lifeboat. You're right that below -20 things start to get a bit trickier, but luckily composites, so for instance glass fibre and carbon and all sorts of other things that are set in a plastic resin, they tend to perform really well at low temperatures. And actually I did a few tests with a fantastic company called Easy Composites, who you may well have come across on YouTube as well, and we spent a lot of time dropping the temperature down around various types of composite, and we managed to get performance ratings for room temperature, 0 degrees, -20, -40, and the performance was absolutely fantastic down at -40. And I think even one of the composites improved in its strength and ability to withstand impact at low temperatures. So I'm not worried about the hull of the boat at all. Some of the fixtures and fittings you need to be a bit careful about, but most plastics can handle low temperatures. Polypropylene and a few others will go brittle, and if you give them a thwack, will break at temperatures below -20, -30. But no, the metal work, there shouldn't be a big issue. The electronics and the electrics, the batteries you need to be careful of. You need to make sure you're, for instance, not charging lithium batteries at below 0 degrees unless you have heating elements installed and so on. But electrical circuits don't mind the cold. It's mostly the battery chemistry you have to be careful about. So yeah, I'm keeping in mind the fact I spent months and months and months of my life in very cold temperatures, not in towns, but actually really out in the middle of nowhere, means I have a bit of a sixth sense about, is this going to survive the cold? If this gets thwacked, is it going to snap in half? I've not come across anything that fundamentally worries me yet because of the temperature. Next question is, how are you charging your batteries on board? And what are you doing in terms of thermal management, like what heaters and that sort of thing? When we're actually underway, we're not going to bother with heating. And in fact, because of the heat generated by the engine and the level of insulation in Alan, I'm not going to bother with heating whilst underway. When we are stationary, and in fact Alan is supposed to be stationary, engine off, locked in sea ice or alongside sea ice for prolonged periods of time, and so then we are going to have a heater. And I've got a Reflex, I think that's the right way to pronounce it. I think they're either Danish or German made. I imported mine from Germany, and they're fantastic diesel supplied heaters, and it's also got a cooking surface on top. So I've got one of those. It's currently in my warehouse because it's definitely not the weather at the moment to need one of those, and it will take a while to install. But that will be the plan for when we have seriously cold temperatures outside Alan and we need quite a few kilowatts of heat safely and reliably heating up the inside. Charging batteries on board when we're alongside and in civilization, I simply have an AC converter which keeps our batteries healthy and at the right level of charge. When we're away, there's going to be a combination of, originally it was just going to be wind generation plus a diesel generator, which we were going to run on the deck or even on the ice when we were locked into the ice to keep the noise down because they're pretty noisy. So a wind generator which would also sit on top of the mast, a mast which I have but haven't installed yet, and that will give us a low-level constant charge on the batteries. Because Alan's not just going to be operating in the winter now, I also have a solar panel, and I'm going to buy some bigger, more efficient solar panels to mount on the side so that when we're travelling in sort of spring season, I'll also be able to get some extra juice from those. The batteries are pretty heavy duty and they can handle very high charging currents. So what I wanted to do with the diesel generator, which was going to put out 3-4 kilowatts, is to charge them fairly irregularly but with a very, very high current to make sure that we don't waste diesel, so using all of the power that diesel generator could put out for a period of time. But that's very much on the back burner now because it's not what we're going to be doing particularly soon. Next question is from someone who says that they are a blood donor. I mean, I can't argue with that. I am too. It's a very, very good thing to do, although I think they might have got confused about what sort of donor I was looking for here. Anyway, this blood donor has decided that he has enjoyed the build so far. How is Alan handling rough and normal seas? Oh, yeah, seas spelt. Yeah, okay. Normal seas compared to a normal boat of the same size. Security is guaranteed, but how about ride quality? Right, yeah. So you're right in that there's almost nothing that could destroy or sink Alan apart from fire or something so cataclysmic that, frankly, the fact that Alan's no longer around probably means that we're no longer around. Ride quality, I'm going to find out over the next week or so. Hopefully we've got sea trials delayed again next weekend, and we'll be able to see when there's a bit of chop how the ballast is doing and how much more ballast we need. The sea handling is probably not going to be great, and we may well need to accept that, first of all, it's going to be bad in rough seas, and we have to try and pick our weather carefully. There's also the fact that the more ballast and the more intelligently we locate it, the better it will get. And I think there's plenty of space actually around the keel and around the prop guard as well, where we can improve, first of all, the shape of the hull, but also get in an awful lot more ballast. So the answer is I don't know what Alan's handling is going to be like. Beyond just stability, I also found last time round that the rudder extension I put on gives us pretty good steering response in the forward direction, but when going astern, you get almost nothing. So you pretty much just go astern with no steering whatsoever. I'm not particularly bothered about that. Alan's made for going forward, not going backwards, so we'll see how that one goes. Although I'm probably going to look at that rudder again, because the original plan was for Alan to only do a relatively short passage through not particularly challenging seas, and so I put on I wouldn't say a lightweight rudder extension, but one that may need beefing up. Next question is, will Alan the lifeboat have its own lifeboat? Good question, but Alan is spelt A-L-A-N, and I'm confused about the whole A-L-L-E-N thing that's been going on a lot. We can't change Alan's name. Alan is called Alan, not Alan, so Alan's Alan. Alan will not have his own lifeboat, although he did have a life raft, which was rated up to 4 people for offshore use. And I don't have it anymore, but I will be getting another one when we go offshore. I'm not going to bother for light coastal work, but the second we go blue water, then we're going to get a life raft. Not because I'm worried about Alan sinking again. Alan can't sink. If Alan is chopped in half, both halves of Alan will float. If there's a fire, though, you need to get off Alan and let him burn. So we do need to have a life raft for that. What future things do you need to do to Alan? That's quite a long list. I think going back right to the beginning of the Q&A, there's an unlimited number of things you can do to improve a boat. But I think the things to get Alan ready to go, I need to be completely happy that the engine and propeller gives us enough thrust in rough seas. We'll find that out pretty soon. I need to get the mast set up all done. I need to finish off the paint job to make sure that the gel coat is properly protected against the elements. I want to make sure that the fuel capacity on the racking is fine for the distances that we want to travel. And beyond that, sleeping areas need finishing off. At the moment, it's just a case of bunking wherever you can. But no, the fundamentals are there. All the lights work. The engine works really sweetly. We got that serviced a couple of weeks ago. So really, any future things are simply to make Alan a bit cooler. Probably some more navigation electronics need to go in. There's no AIS yet because we're not going offshore yet. So a few toys that need to be installed. Dave asks, is Alan safe? That's all that matters. Well, currently, Alan is sat in a boatyard with 24-hour CCTV and is a good 100 meters away from the sea. So Alan really couldn't be a great deal safer right now. I think probably I can't think of many things apart from a fire that would make Alan unsafe. So I think for now, Dave, your fears are not justified. Mark asks, what kind of orange is Alan? Now, this is a good question, but you spelled Alan wrong again. A-L-A-N. What kind of orange is Alan? Alan was originally 2005 on the RAL colour chart. The top side is now painted 2010, which is a slightly brighter orange. So now you know. There's a next question, which is, are you able to film your adventures? Yes. I have a camera, which I'm currently staring at now. I have a box full of other cameras as well. Yes, absolutely. And I'll be doing as much as I possibly can. Speaking to a TV production company at the moment about getting Alan on film again. We were pretty much sorted with the documentary last year, but then the whole thing was kiboshed. So having to get that all started up from scratch. But yeah, we're going to be doing all sorts of filming with Alan in the future because, well, it would be kind of cruel for me to refit Alan and then not show you what I do with him. And then someone tells me about how it's great that I have drive and physical fitness. So that's very kind of you. Presumptuous, but kind. Thank you very much. I will try and live up to that. And your check is in the post. Right, Hugh asks, how do you manage medical emergencies on your expedition? Do you bring medical equipment? If so, where on Alan would it be stored? Now, on expeditions I've done in the past, ski journeys in the middle of nowhere, living in a tent, you have a small medipack. Everyone on the expedition has some expedition medical training. I've never worked with a fully qualified doctor on an expedition yet. That would obviously be the holy grail. But if everyone has specific training for the kind of problems that we might be dealing with, that's a pretty good start. And that means some training in how to do some slightly invasive things, how to keep someone alive if they are very badly injured, just until real medical help can arrive. But of course, you know what the limitations that unqualified people without a full clinical set of gear can manage. Yes, so the medikit will be stored on Alan. It wouldn't be particularly large. It would just be stored in one of those cupboards that you saw in one of the early episodes, but obviously close to hand if there's a really immediate emergency. Am I able to install Starlink or some kind of satellite internet on Alan? Now, sadly, although Elon Musk is a bit of a weird genius and doing all sorts of exciting things, Starlink is not really going to be great in the Arctic for the foreseeable future. They're really concentrating on high areas of population, and it's going to be quite a few years before Starlink's any good on the Arctic Ocean or down at the bottom of the world. So Starlink's not going to be any good for me really soon, but we do have Iridium, which is the global satellite network, and they've got their next generation set of satellites in the sky now, which are L-band, which gives us, if you're very wealthy and you can afford it, it gives you reasonable broadband quality connection all the way up to the North Pole. So at the moment, I don't have a full satellite set up on Alan. I have a tracker that's Iridium connected and satellite phones and a beeper system that's also linked to the Iridium satellite network, but I don't have that broadband yet. We were going to have it for the expedition I should be on now, but that sponsorship deal obviously set sail when the expedition was cancelled, so that was a shame. But no Starlink, whatever the next Iridium will be. Next question is, what's the planned endurance or range for a given amount of people? Now, if we're given an amount of people, obviously there'll be a difference in fuel economy depending on how many people are aboard. The original boat was designed to take 68 people and was designed, I think, 200 litres was the fuel tank capacity, and to meet SOLAS requirements, it simply needed to be able to do 24 hours at a constant 6 knots. But of course, it would have spare fuel, and that there would be a reserve and a bit of a cushion there. So it's difficult to know. And one of the main things I want to find out on sea trials next weekend is actually at the sweet spot in the rev range, what sort of fuel economy we get out of Alan at his current displacement. So I don't know at the moment. The racking will allow 2,000 or 2,500 litres of diesel to be carried. So that's a pretty stonking range. The next question is, we are on the penultimate page now. From a donor. Donors are the very, very best people because they allow me to do all this. And they certainly allow me to do my sea trials next weekend. Thank you, Jessica. How do I stay warm on my expeditions? Even as a Canadian, it seems like an unpleasant experience. Well, I don't know where you live in Canada. I guess if you live in Vancouver, you just have to be used to being rained on. But the rest of Canada does get pretty damn cold. I've spent quite a long time up in the north where it gets, minus 35, minus 40 for a good chunk of the winter. So, yeah, the way to stay warm is keeping dry. It's the absolute key. If you can keep your gear, in particular the stuff touching your skin, dry, then you'll be okay. Now, obviously, on board a boat, things are different. And I'm not a master mariner. I'm very much learning in that respect. And I understand that it's much harder to keep dry at sea than it is to keep dry either on an ice cap or traveling on sea ice or a frozen lake or whatever. So yeah, staying warm on expeditions, when you're doing physical exercise, it's tempting to wear too much because it's nice and comfortable to begin with. But then if you're hauling a sledge or doing anything physical, you'll get too hot, then you'll sweat turns to ice, you freeze to death. That's a slight exaggeration perhaps, but that's pretty much how it goes. And for that reason, you need to wear a lot less than you'd imagine so that moisture can escape as you work. And that's why having breathable clothing is a really good idea. On board a boat, it's going to be a different matter. You will get wet if you're in any sort of a sea, but we will have the ability to come into the interior of Alan, get ourselves dried off, changes of clothes, and the inside will be heated. So it'll be less of an issue when we're along the coastlines or even offshore. The next question is, how many hours in total do you think you've spent working on Alan so far? Did you have that much outside help to work on it? Wow, yeah. My team and I bought Alan in the summer of 2019, and it was supposed to be about a year's work with the three of us plus a few helpers until the launch mid-late last year. And yeah, I'm now very much in the thousands of hours of work. If you then add on the team's work as well, there'll be a bit added on there. I was doing the vast bulk of it because most of the design work was mine, and it just made sense that I cracked on with most of the installation work. And we had some help from friends and helpers at the time, so that was very helpful. The pace of work since I've been taking Alan on solo has definitely slowed, but during lockdown it was quite a good opportunity for me to get out my home and get out and work on a project. So I've been able to do, particularly when there wasn't any speaking work for me to do, because obviously no one was booking speakers, I was able to do sometimes weeks of a good 50, 60 hours, really, really intense weeks of work. And that includes obviously, at either end of that, I had to drive backwards and forwards because the boatyard is not right where I live. Did you have much work from outside? Really, we had both of the engine servicing has been done by a professional because we definitely can't do that ourselves. But no, most of the work's been done by me, and certainly the design and the ideas stuff has been my remit. Recently, Dick has been really, really helpful, helping me cut ballast and giving me advice on things because his experience is remarkable. He's the skipper who will be helping me out next weekend on the sea trials. Next question: can you go over the navigation and communication systems? There'll be multiple layers. When you're coastal, you'll have standard things like a normal mobile phone, cell phone, and GPS, Iridium tracker, personal locator beacon, which is buoyant, so like an EPIRB. So that's a fairly standard emergency set of kit. And then beyond that, there will be AIS to go with our VHS system. At the moment, I'm just using handheld VHF, but I want to get a proper larger installed unit at some point. That's why you becoming a donor would be extremely useful, so I can have a proper VHS system. And then there's Iridium. So I talked about Iridium a few minutes ago with a proper satellite link up, and that would then mean I can communicate far more in depth and far more regularly once I have even a slow internet connection set up, which will give us coverage all the way up to the North Pole and around that region. What else to do with navigation? There's an awful lot of gadgets and gear that serious yachters have when they travel oceans, when they travel long distance blue water. And so there's auto helm, there's all sorts of things that I could install. At the moment, I'm keeping things quite simple, quite manual, because things are easy to fix if they break, and I simply don't have the resources at the moment to really go the whole hog with technology. But as time goes on, maybe that would improve. Is Alan going to have sleeping bunks? Not really. We're going to have, because there's only one internal area, there's only one space inside, there isn't cabins and a head section, it really is just one area. The rear section is going to be the working area, the forward section is going to be fuel storage, and the living and sort of more not recreational, the more domestic area towards the bow. And there I'm going to install removable, lightweight, but very strong bunk platforms, which will connect on during the night time or when people need to sleep off shift, and then they can be put away when we need the space back. So we're not doing hammocks because I don't sleep very well in a hammock, and I think they're a bit daft. So I'm just going to go with sleeping platforms, and then you can put foam sleeping gear on top and then pack it away during the working day. Do I have a particular diet or exercise routine that gets you in shape for this sort of work? I normally focus on running, cycling, and gym and circuits work when I am in the UK. And then particularly during the summertime, I'm I guess you could call it sort of triathlon training. I used to do a lot of triathlons, mid and long distance triathlons. I do a bit less these days just because I'm focusing on my expeditions. Before an expedition, I will then tweak my training to be better focused towards hauling a sledge. And that's normally leg and lower back work. So more cycling, heavier weights, and I then put on a bit of weight before I go away. Now, I found actually on my last big training expedition that I'd gone too heavy on the running, and although my fitness was pretty much as high as it's ever been, so getting really high on the bleep test score and various things like that, I found that my leg strength was not quite where I was used to having it, and that was a bit of a shot across the bows for me. And so I've then focused for the remainder of that year on building my leg strength back to where it can be, because of course running can sometimes fight you a bit when you're trying to keep strength on. I'm going to do some episodes on my training at some point, whether they go on this channel or on a separate channel, because I wouldn't want to distract too many people from Alan, because you'll start getting very, very upset at me. But I will try and cover that side of my work and my life as well at some point. We're now on to the last page before I go for the final ones. I'll just have a bit of a rehydration. I'm curious about the fuel bladders. What happens if by accident you stab one? Does all the fuel get out, or is it reinforced to avoid that sort of thing? The flexible, collapsible fuel bladders that I've got, I originally had quite a few of them, but I've now only got one, which is a shame. And they take 400 litres of diesel, or in fact other types of fuel, but for me it'll be diesel. They are extremely well made and high grade. So yes, if you took an extremely sharp knife and stabbed it, it will probably puncture. But for abrasion, day-to-day knocks and scrapes, it'll be absolutely fine. Just don't charge at it with a large machete, because that would be a really stupid thing to do. If it is punctured, yes, all the fuel will definitely get out, and that's not something I really want to happen. It will make me very, very upset. Is it reinforced? It's also reinforced underneath the bladder, so if there's any sort of vibration or shaking or anything underneath, you won't get abrasion essentially working its way through the bottom of the bladder. So it's well designed. If you couldn't paint Alan orange, what color would you choose? So not black, grey or blue, because that's basically camouflage when you're at sea. Yellow's kind of already been taken by a bunch of guys who wanted to do a cool lifeboat project. I guess lime green would be fun. That would probably stand out. Lime green perhaps, but Alan's orange, so he's going to stay orange. In your opinion, would it be possible to convert a lifeboat like Alan into a semi-submarine? No. Right. What has been your favourite thing to work on during the refit? Someone who specifically says they are not a donor, which is slightly passive-aggressive. I think you should become a donor. What has been your favourite thing to work on during the refit? The electrics were really satisfying, because I had to learn pretty much from scratch how to design quite a complex electrical system, and it switched on the first time I turned the knob, and that was very, very satisfying. My favourite thing otherwise... What do I do when I'm a bit fed up with a day of work on Alan and I just want to feel like I'm making some progress? Painting the engine. So if you get little flakes of old red paint on the engine, I quite enjoy brushing those off and repainting them. It's just ridiculously easy, and it means I can think about other things whilst I'm doing it. And if I've been frustrated by the progress I've been making on the boat somewhere else, then I maybe just get out the little pot of red paint and start touching up the engine, which makes it look smarter. There's a few which I've circled, which I'm going to come back to. I think you're probably going to find out why. Whoever came up with these are extremely lucky that I'm going to bother answering them. All right, the first one. Why don't you get another ice boat built, customized for the job? More of you need to donate, and then I'll sell out and buy a 300-foot icebreaker with a nuclear engine. All right, the next one. This is from someone who said donor, and then just kidding, I'm a cheater. The question was, do you love your viewers? Not you, Jack something twist. Not at all. Why not buy a different, maybe bigger boat? I maybe should have tied that one up with the one before last. No, I'm not going to bother answering that one. I think there was a few more hiding away. This is actually a reasonably good question. Why are you doing this? I guess I have a phobia of desks. I don't want to do a job where I sit behind a desk all the time, which is why I then end up writing lots of books, which means I sit behind a desk. Although I tend to write my books in pubs because it's more fun. And it makes me not sit at the desk, which you can't see behind the camera, all day long. Why am I doing this? Because I'm really lucky. I'm really lucky to be able to do something kind of ridiculous for a living, but something which gives me a great deal of experience and skills in a part of life that I never would have had otherwise. And I have a pretty well-focused purpose, which I think will become pretty clear in the coming years. Those of you who follow me on Twitter and listen to my slightly more focused comments on various aspects of life will see that there is a game plan, and Alan and my expeditions are really intrinsically part of that. Why am I doing this in particular? Why am I putting Alan together? And why am I making Alan ready for expeditions? Well, because first of all, Alan deserves it. And secondly, Alan can get me to parts of the Arctic which it's extremely difficult to get to otherwise. Logistics in the Arctic has become dramatically harder over the last 10, 15 years for private expeditions. And actually having your own ability to get in and to get out under your own steam and with your own safe, I don't want to say vessel, your own sort of safe haven is a very, very useful thing to have. So Alan is not just something I'm fancying doing. It's got a real expedition role for the next few years. And then the final one, again, I probably shouldn't have added this one in, from someone who says that they are an organ donor, which again is laudable. What blood type are you? I'm the one that's not particularly useful. I'm A positive, which is the one that apparently there's absolutely tons of. So even if I donate it, which I do, there's so much of it that most people don't really... I think all the blood banks are pretty much full of O positive. But anyway, I mean, I don't know why that's at all useful for you to know, but now you know, and I feel a sort of slight obligation to answer at least most of the questions that I've been given. Those of you who haven't had your questions answered, I have no apologies for that whatsoever. So what we're going to do now is finish. I'm going to implore you to read this book and this book and this book. But if you read this book, then I don't necessarily recommend that you read this book because they are the same book. This is the original hardback and this is the updated paperback. This is actually better. So that's probably the one to buy. Anyway, you weren't going to get away with that, a shameless plug. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you for sending in your questions. I will do another one of these at some point. Put more commas in your questions. That will be my feedback. And otherwise, I will see you on Alan.